Ethan was the young man's name. His life could have gone differently if not for that fateful night. The accident had torn his fate in two, life before and life after. But what does after mean when the body lies motionless, and the mind continues to wander through a reality that feels as tangible as before? For him, nothing was more real than the world in which he found himself, a world of gods and demons. By day, Ethan found himself among divine beings, glowing with unshakable power and wisdom. They floated through the air, their clothes, seemingly woven from pure light, flowing around them like rivers. The meadows and forests surrounding them were unimaginably beautiful. Vibrant green landscapes, a sky so blue that it felt infinite, and lakes so clear that they reflected all of this magnificence like a mirror. The gods conversed with him, gifting him knowledge, and they seemed like friends. They guided him through these enchanting lands, explaining ancient truths that he would never have grasped in the ordinary world. It was paradise. Every moment in their company felt like a blessing. But at night, everything changed. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky was consumed by darkness, the gods were replaced by demons. There was no warning of their arrival. They simply appeared out of nowhere, and the air grew chillingly cold. Ethan found himself trapped in labyrinthine catacombs and caves whose walls pulsed with an ancient malevolence. Narrow corridors closed in on him, as if the very air were trying to smother him. Flames flickered along the walls, casting an unnatural red light that didn't warm, but instead seemed to drain the heat from his body. Smoke filled the air, thick and acrid, and the ground beneath his feet was covered with layers of dust and grime, mixed with the blood of those who had tried to escape before him. He ran, like a hunted animal, desperate to flee from the demons whose eyes gleamed with hatred in the shadows. Their claws scraped along the stone walls, producing a sharp, grating sound that made his skin crawl. He could hear their footsteps, heavy and getting closer, their breath hot and putrid, as if they could already smell his fear. The walls seemed to shift, closing in on him, as though the demons themselves were controlling them to trap him. He stumbled, fell, but each time he picked himself up and ran, his mind slowly cracking under the pressure of this endless nightmare. Where did reality end and the dream begin? He no longer knew. Over time, his fears began to bleed into his daytime consciousness. The peaceful landscapes of the gods no longer seemed so serene. The wind across the meadows whispered threats. The lakes appeared deeper, darker, and he began to notice shadows lurking beneath their surfaces. He asked the gods questions, but they only smiled mysteriously, evading his inquiries. Each night, he ran again and again from the demons, and with each flight it became harder to distinguish what was real. The boundaries of his mind started to blur. He could no longer tell where he was. Was this world his reality? Or a nightmare? Gradually, Ethan began to believe that this was his fate, to be eternally trapped between light and darkness, gods and demons, heaven and hell. One night, after an especially long and grueling chase, the demons finally caught him. Their claws sank into his flesh, pulling him down into the deepest recesses of the caves. He screamed, fighting to break free, but their strength was overwhelming. Everything went black. And in that moment, when it seemed that all was lost, Ethan opened his eyes. He was in a hospital room. People in white coats hovered over him. The machines around him beeped rhythmically, and his body felt like it was encased in a cage of immobility. But his mind refused to accept this. He was still convinced that the demons were near, that this hospital light was just another trap, a trick to lull him into letting his guard down. "They're here," he shouted. trying to tear himself from the bed. The people around him rushed to restrain him, but to Ethan they were no doctors or family. In his eyes they had become the demons who had once again come for him. He fought them off as best he could, throwing medical instruments, struggling to escape, but they were too strong. His family watched in horror. His brother and mother, who hadn't left his side for all those years, couldn't believe that Ethan was finally back with them. But there was one problem. He didn't recognize them. To him, they were just another illusion, crafted by his tormentors. Their cries, their pleas, their tears only reinforced his belief that this was another trick by the demons. They tried to help him, but when his aggression became unbearable, they had no choice but to make a heartbreaking decision. Ethan was committed to a psychiatric institution where he spent the remainder of his days, lost in an eternal nightmare. The doctors couldn't bring him out of his paranoid state, and every night as he tried to sleep, the same creatures he had run from in his other world crept back into his mind. And with each passing night, their shadows grew ever more real.